The views and opinions expressed on this program are those of the guests appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 8 News Now or Nexstar Media Group.
Given what you just said, can you address your endorsement from the Story County Sheriff, who has facing multiple accusations, including sexual harassment?
Today on Politics Now, our Republican Gubernatorial Forum pits 4 candidates against each other. The response that drew the most reaction.
It's just unbelievable to me that Adam Laxalt said what he said on this stage tonight.
Almost all of them did say they want to keep the guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and people who are registered abusers and things like that.
Plus, our panel breaks down how the candidates did and what it may mean for them going forward.
I think most importantly, it's understanding the reorganization of the Clark County School District.
And Superintendent Pat Skorkowsky tells us about the transition between him and the man set to take over the top job at the end of the month.
From 8 News Now, this is Politics Now with Steve Sebelius and Patrick Walker.
It was a busy week at 8 News Now as we held a forum for the Republican candidates for governor. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Sebelius. I moderated the forum along with Christiane Klein.
Yeah, busy is an understatement. I'm Patrick Walker. Now, it included Attorney General Adam Laxalt, State Treasurer Dan Schwartz, small business owner Jared Fisher, and anthropology professor Frederick Conquest. It was done with a pre-taped interview style where our candidates answered questions. On cutting bureaucracy, State Treasurer Dan Schwartz and CSN Professor Fred Conquest have specific agencies they'd start with.
What I'm going to take a long, hard look at is GOED, which is the Governor's Office of Economic Development. I think this agency, its intent is great. It certainly has tried to do the right thing, but all it has done is hand out tax abatements to industries that don't need them.
I think we need to get rid of the Nevada system of higher education. I think it duplicates the education department of the state.
On the topic of the Governor's Office of Economic Development, Attorney General Adam Laxalt says some restructuring could be in order, while businessman Jared Fisher says large incentive packages can still be justified.
I think we're at a point in time in the economic development world where we should start focusing a little less on large taxpayer incentives to bring companies in.
I can tell you this. If you don't put money out, you're not going to attract business in. We as a state, we cannot expect people just to move to Nevada to open up businesses. Most of the time it comes down to the dollar.
The candidates all answered individual questions as well. It's one final push as early voting is underway and Election Day is just 2 weeks away. Yeah, and that piece being done right after the forum. At this point now, Election Day is just over a week away. So, Steve, after the forum, the thing that was picked up most by Laxalt's opponents and Democrats was his answer about an endorsement from the Story County Sheriff. Here is the exchange with Christiane.
Given what you just said, can you address your endorsement from the Story County Sheriff, who has facing multiple accusations, including sexual harassment and sexual assault? Now, given that he has admitted some of those allegations against him in a deposition, will you renounce or reject that endorsement?
So, you know, we're a prosecuting office, and you know, I hope the voters understand that while there's kind of political theatrics going on right now and people demand immediate rejection or endorsement, things like that, this case was referred to my office just a few weeks ago. I have career prosecutors, investigators looking on it, and you know, I've said this before. It's not covered, of course, because they want to use this as a political battering ram. I'm not going to do or say anything until that investigation is complete. And I think if I were to come out and unendorse or endorse at this stage of the game, it would either predict or prejudge the investigation.
All right, Steve, so what do you think? Was that a reasonable answer?
I mean, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, the AG's office usually doesn't confirm or deny investigations, so I think Laxalt kind of let the cat out of the bag there. But when I've tried to follow up with his office, a spokeswoman said they would have no further comment. Second, I don't see that renouncing an endorsement would pose any larger conflict for the prosecutors in his office than simply accepting the endorsement in the first place, which Laxalt clearly has done. And, you know, prosecution decisions are official business, and endorsements are political, so they really should be separate. But there's a conflict, I think, for Laxalt either way, whichever way he goes. Well, after the debate, we had a panel of KXNT radio host Alan Stock and Battleborn Progress Executive Director Annette Magnus, our face-off crew, weigh in on how the candidates did and what they took away from it. Here are their answers to how the candidates answered the gun background check answer, starting with a soundbite from Jared Fisher.
I am not for background checks, so to speak. I do believe that we need to implement the laws that we currently have. But I don't own a gun, but I respect them, and I know that guns aren't what everybody thinks they're out to go kill people. People collect guns for because they're collectors. They collect them for their own safety. They collect them because they love to go hunt. And these are reasons that people do collect guns. So I don't believe that we should implement new legislation to restrict these people with their Second Amendment right. And I think we already have enough laws in place. If we simply just follow what we have, then I think that we can start to address other ways of stopping this violence before it happens.
Okay, so that was one of the answers on that question. So just give you a chance to react to that or expand if you want to on any of the other answers you heard.
Yeah, I find it interesting that that's Mr. Fisher's answer to this question. I mean, Mr. Fisher's not even a gun owner, yet he has these strong opinions. I'm actually a gun owner. I actually have strong opinions, and I believe in the Second Amendment, yet I also believe in background checks, and I believed in Question 1 so much so that my organization supported that initiative. And for me, again, I go back to Adam Laxalt's answer because it's just unbelievable to me that Adam Laxalt said what he said on this stage tonight. To me, he cannot sit up here and say, I'm a father and I support the Second Amendment and I support background checks, but what he left out was, I am the face of the NRA, I am in the pocket of special interests in the gun lobby, and I was the face for the anti-Question 1 campaign. He is having it both ways, and Nevada voters need to be able to see through that. This is unacceptable.
Alan, if you want to quick.
Well, I mean, first of all, it was interesting what Jared Fisher said also. I was intrigued by it because you're right, he doesn't own a gun. He's not a gun owner, and yet he did say, I'm against background checks. That's a phrase that he used. I'm not sure he meant to say it that way, but that's what he said. And most of us who have guns or CCWs, we certainly have gone through background checks. And as in opposition to what Annette's saying, I mean, I said last week, I'm a proud member of the NRA. I belong to the NRA. I support what they want to do. But having said that, you know, I think there needs to be some clarification for where some of these folks are coming from. I don't think they want to really commit to doing extending background checks to private party sales. But on the other hand, they were saying, almost all of them did say they want to keep the guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and people who are registered abusers and things like that, which is, I agree with all that. The question is how you're going to go about doing it, and that was something that they all avoided.
Well, and let me just add to that. The reason Adam Laxalt sat up here and said what he said is because he knows gun violence prevention and these measures we're talking about right here, background checks and bump stocks, he also said bump stocks, those issues are winning issues. Those issues are issues that Nevadans want to hear about because they want tougher measures around those laws. They expect all of the candidates to be talking about that. So that is why he sat up here tonight and essentially did an about-face, a complete about-face on that issue. And again, I find it disgusting that he wants to be on TV talking about background checks now when he sat on TV last cycle saying he was against the measure. It's completely disgusting to me.
All right, well, we have a ton of Republican forum-related material posted online. It includes the whole forum. If you missed it, you can watch the full hour. And we also have additional questions that we asked the 4 candidates that had to be cut from the hour for timing purposes.
And while you're there, the entire Democratic gubernatorial debate between County Commissioner Steve Sisolak and Chris Giuliani is on our website as well.
All right. Switching gears a little bit, will the Culinary Union go on strike? As of Friday, negotiations are underway between the Culinary Union and 34 casino resorts on the Strip and downtown.
That's right. Contracts expired for nearly 50,000 servers, kitchen workers, and employees. Culinary says it wants better wages, workplace training, and job security, among several other issues. Workers told 8 News Now they're ready to strike if they have to.
It would be a little crazy, but we have to do what we have to do to support our families.
Caesars and MGM Resorts International own more than half the properties where contracts ended on June 1st. Both have made counteroffers to the Culinary Union. MGM told us the company is confident it can resolve the contract issues.
So, Steve, does this seem like something that the Culinary will follow through with, or are you expecting a deal might get struck in the short term?
I think if the negotiations aren't fruitful, absolutely they would see the Culinary going on strike. The union's not afraid to use some very high-pressure tactics, as we have seen, to win concessions. Many people in Las Vegas have never seen this before because the union's reputation and good business climate have let them make deals kind of behind the scenes. If they don't reach a deal with some of these casinos that are still not signed, I think they're going to see something that they haven't seen in quite a while, and it will be a spectacle.
Yeah, a spectacle to say the least. Well, preparing the next chief.
I think we talk about transitions, getting ready for the legislative session, and trying to make sure that we're all on the same page.
CCSD Superintendent Pat Skorkowsky tells me the steps he's taking to get his successor ready and his plans after he leaves.
Welcome back to Politics Now.
The changing of the guard is about to get underway at the Clark County School District. New Superintendent Dr. Jesus Jara starts on June 19th.
And outgoing Superintendent Pat Skorkowsky is leaving on June 30th. I sat down with Skorkowsky to talk about the transition and reflect on his time leading CCSD. With the new superintendent transitioning in, kind of talk to me a little bit about what those conversations are going to look like now. A lot of good things to carry over, some things that are some challenges as well. But what are those conversations going to be like that you have with Dr. Jara?
I think most importantly, it's understanding the reorganization of the Clark County School District. That's the biggest piece that will be different for him. Nobody else in the United States is doing this. I think we talk about transitions, getting ready for the legislative session, and trying to make sure that we're all on the same page going into the legislative session for 2019. I know it doesn't start for a while, but that's really important. I think also talking about the transition itself and how to do that smoothly so that he can come in and seamlessly be able to pick up where we're going academically, but be able to take it to the next level.
He kind of has to come in almost in a lobbyist role in a sense, and even starting those BDRs, the bill drafts. That work does start right now.
It actually, it will start next week when our board looks at our legislative platform for the first time. That will happen, continue in July and August, because those BDRs from the district have to be in before the end of August. So he's got to get ready. He's got to meet community members. And so when I was announced that I was going to be on the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance board, that actual seat is for him so that he can get to know the business and community leaders, so that he can be able to get to know what their thoughts are about the Clark County School District and how to move ahead.
Talk to me a little bit about now, obviously, I don't think you're going to be tired of hearing about the word budget, right? That's not going to be something you'll be tired of hearing. But that is a conversation that will continue on. Any words of advice for your successor stepping into that chair that, hey, you know, there are some things that need to be worked out?
The most important thing that he needs to understand is that we have to get more funding for the base. The categorical dollars have been great, but they don't allow for us to use that money for salaries and benefits for our employees. And so if we truly want to treat our employees right and give them the raises and the benefits that they deserve, then we have to get that in the distributive schools account or the per pupil average.
All right, so a little crystal ball here looking into the future. Maybe can't say exactly, but kind of what are the plans here looking into the future for you? Here as retirement's coming. Stick around Las Vegas for a while. Anything you want to do? What's that going to look like?
Definitely going to stay in Las Vegas. This is my home. I've been here for 30 years, lived here longer than anywhere else. The first task is to learn how to sleep again. I'll be honest with you, that's a big challenge right now. And then the other piece, you know, I want to make sure that I set Dr. Jara up for success. And so anything I do will be kind of in the backgrounds, do some volunteer work for some organizations and potentially do, you know, some other things outside of the state. But he needs to become the educational leader for the state of Nevada, and I need to kind of take a step back and make sure that he has my cell phone and he can call me anytime he wants to.
All right, so Steve, I brought up the BDRs just to talk about the clock is ticking. They have to get those drafts in so that they can be considered for the 2019 session. What do you think are going to be some of the things they specifically will be looking for?
I think Superintendent Skorkowsky hinted at one right there when he talked about boosting the DSA so they have more money for teacher salaries and not money that's categorically programmed for certain specific things. But probably also the changes to the weighted funding formula, because Clark County deals with things that are not an issue in the rural and northern parts of the state, more ELL students, more low-income students, more special education students, and so probably changes to that weighted funding formula to help them deal with those issues as well.
Yeah, some changes have been made. That is an older funding formula. They talk about 50, 60 years old, but more changes, they say, are desperately needed.
Yeah, absolutely, and it comes up quite often in Carson City as well. Well, early voting is going on now, so are people taking advantage? I'll break down the numbers so far next.
Plus, crisis averted, a fundraiser in northern Nevada that might have caused some problems for
News now.
Well, voters are taking advantage of early voting like never before, setting records for turnout on every single day so far. As of Thursday, 44,474 people in Clark County have voted either through early voting or by mail, far surpassing the totals logged after the first 6 days of early voting in any election year this decade. Back in 2010, just more than 29,000 voters had gone to the polls at this point, making that the second most popular year in the last 5 election cycles. That year saw Governor Brian Sandoval elected for the first time. Clark County Registrar of Voters Joe Gloria said the records are being set because of the high-profile contests, including this year's gubernatorial face-off between Democratic Clark County Commissioners Chris June Kiliani and Steve Sisolak. And Democrats are way ahead in early voting here in Clark County. They comprise 52% of the total early and mail votes cast in the county so far. Republicans account for almost 36% of early votes, and nonpartisans who can't vote in many primary races because they haven't signed up with a political party account for just 11% of the early and mail votes cast thus far. Early voting began on May 26th and runs through June 8th. Primary election day is on June 12th. Patrick?
Steve can't stress how important it is to get out and vote. Well, this is the Race Now, where we go over some of the other big news in the 2018 races. Congressional District 3 Republican candidate and former consumer reporter Michelle Mortensen got a bit of a boost with a glowing profile in the Washington Post. Mortensen still has an uphill battle in that CD3 race. She has been trailing Danny Tarkanian in both fundraising and in the recent polls. Well, a Nevada judge has breathed some new life into a ballot measure aimed at banning sanctuary cities, but it will not go before voters in the 2018 election. The initiative's wording was first challenged by the American Civil Liberties Union of Nevada. A reworded initiative was approved by a Carson City judge this week, but there is not enough time to gather signatures before a June 19th deadline. Backers of the ban on immigration safe havens say they will try to qualify the measure in 2020. And several high-profile Republicans were scheduled to be at a fundraising event this weekend where the MC was originally slated to be Story County Sheriff Gerald Antenoro, who we told you about at the top of the show. The guest list included Republican Senator Dean Heller, whose campaign told us on Thursday that he is no longer attending. Attorney General and Republican gubernatorial candidate Adam Laxalt was also scheduled to attend, but his campaign did not respond to our request to find out if he's still attending. Attorney General candidate Wes Duncan was on the guest list as well, but on Thursday it was announced that Antenoro would not be attending that event after all. So, Steve, how big of a role is Story County Sheriff Gerald Antenoro going to be playing in this campaign?
Yeah, who we'd never heard of before this campaign. He's starting to play a bigger and bigger role as the thing goes on. And, you know, candidates always want to burnish their law enforcement credentials. They always want to say, I've been endorsed by every sheriff in the state. But with these allegations, it seems like that might be a little counterintuitive and go against that law and order credentials that they really want to get.
All right, well, stick around. Coming up on Politics Now, a couple of pretty important local races could be decided on June 12th. We'll talk more about that in just a minute.
weekends on CBS.
Well, a couple of pretty important local races could be decided in the primary on June 12th.
We wanted to look at how much money's been raised and spent in the races for District Attorney and Clark County Sheriff. First, let's look at Sheriff, which is a nonpartisan race, so if one candidate gets more than 50% of the primary vote, he wins. Current Sheriff Joe Lombardo has raised more than $520,000, and he spent more than $625,000 so far. Former North Las Vegas Police Lieutenant Tim Bedwell has raised more than $48,000 and spent more than $75,000. And former School District Police Captain Mike Caldwell has not reported raising any money and only spent $916.
Well, in the race for District Attorney, current DA Steve Wolfson has raised $232,000 and spent $239,000. His only competition, Defense Attorney Robert Langford, has raised $37,000 and spent $33,000. But Langford has some outside help. A PAC called the Nevada Law and Justice PAC has been running attack ads against Wolfson to the tune of spending $118,000. So who is that? We dug into the PAC and found, and it's funded by billionaire George Soros. The PAC is involving itself in district attorney races throughout the country, pushing for more progressive candidates. Well, there's one other element in the district attorney's race. Unless you're a registered Democrat, you won't get a say in who the next district attorney will be. That's because both candidates are registered Democrats and no Republican is running. A law passed in the 2015 legislature makes the primary a general election if the race only includes candidates from one party. So, Steve, is this a high-profile enough race to get a groundswell to overturn that law?
Well, I think it would, because it deprives most voters of having a say. There's 419,000 registered Democrats in Clark County, but there are nearly 300,000 registered Republicans, another 200,000 nonpartisans, and 60,000 people have registered with other parties. That means the majority of the voters in the county, 577,000 voters, won't have a say in this race because they aren't registered Democrats.
We'll see if that gets taken up this year in 2019.
Absolutely. I think they'll probably do that. Well, NV Energy announced it is significantly upping the amount of homegrown clean energy it'll be using.
Yeah, that includes developing 6 new solar plants that will deliver 1,000 megawatts of electricity. That would double NV Energy's renewable energy production. The PUC will review the proposal and make a final decision by the end of the year. That move was praised by environmental groups right here in Nevada.
So we'll be watching to see what happens with that. That's going to be interesting.
Right. That was a big announcement. The governor was there. Big. A lot of the companies that have been and groups that have been critical of NV Energy and supporting maybe some of the energy choice initiatives now are taking a cautious round of applause, at least, saying, hey, we're happy that they're committing to this. Let's make sure it happens.
More green energy, but only if you vote against question 3. Thanks for watching Politics Now. That's our show.
We'll see you next week. We're back to Saturdays starting this weekend. Have a good one.